to Good Morning Revolution. Great to see everyone. And Rosanna, welcome back.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you had a good trip down south to New Orleans. We got a lot to talk about this morning, including the auto strike has increased. Going to be striking another, 38 locations. We just heard UAW President Sean Fain just made an announcement at 10 o'clock this morning about the status of the negotiations. We'll be going into that in just a minute. We're also going to talk about the climate march. And last week we had a wonderful time there. And then finally, there was a big announcement, an important one about providing work status to immigrants in this country, migrants from Venezuela, and the implications. And then always our mailbag question before we go. So let's get started. Uh, Rosanna, the uh, big three claiming broke. We ain't made no money. We can't make no concessions, any concessions to the union. I think the president of one of the corporations said if we grant those demands, it'll break the back of the industry. What do you think?
I think it's a bunch of BS. I mean, I think the auto workers, the union has shown that the record profits. They've shown that the comparison, and I think it's a good strategy to show the comparison between the CEOs and what the workers make. And I think they said it was 400 years before a worker would make that kind of money that the CEOs are making, something to that effect. I heard actually this morning. Um, and I think it pointing out that the injustice and the inequality of the wages proves this person wrong. That they have the money, there is the money, and they should give it to those that are really producing the wealth. CEOs don't produce wealth; it's the workers themselves that produce the wealth. So they should be given the bulk of that money.
The unions have asked for a modest, relative to corporate profit, Anita, wage increase. The corporations, uh, CEOs, and their board of directors increased 40% over the last several years. Workers 3%. I don't even no 5. It doesn't even keep up with the cost of living, Anita.
That's right. Yeah, it's not an unreasonable amount that they're asking. They really made so many concessions back in 2008 when the auto industry was in big trouble. And since that time, as Sean Fain, the union president, points out, they've made $250 billion in profit. And Sean Fain is really looking at the whole industry, or nearly the whole car industry. Of course, there's non-union car shops, but they'll all get a bump up too if when the UAW gets a really good contract. So it's not unreasonable. Our article in the PW printed an article by David Hill about pointing out that there's been $1.7 million in profit for every single member of that bargaining unit over the last 10 years. So they need to get their fair share of that money, that profit that they have actually produced in these auto plants. It's exciting. It's kind of a very really a watershed kind of strike going on right now that could mean better wages across the board for union workers, non-union workers. Just everyone will benefit from a really good settlement with the UAW.
Scott, how do Marxists interpret these back and forth tugs of war between labor and capital? I mean, why do the capitalists resist so much granting minor increases in wages. Is that they're greedy solely,
Well,
or is it something else at work?
it's not solely a question of greed. No, it's capitalism, the capitalist class to survive, to keep functioning the way it functions, has to pursue maximum profit. It has to grow. It needs um, more. So greed, it's not the sort of moral uh, compulsion of greed, it's the economic compulsion of the existence of capital. The capitalist class is fighting for its um, existence and its dominance in the same way that workers are fighting for their rights and their survival. And it comes down to a question of, Joe, you mentioned, breaking the back of the industry. Who is the backbone of that industry? Is it the shareholders who do nothing, who have no role except owning and raking in profits? Or is it the workers, who are the actual backbone, as Rosanna said? Um, this is a fight for, excuse me, economic betterment, but also for the the role and the future of and the kind of power of the working class.
Good point. What we're talking about is the iron law, Marx and Engels used to call it, a maximization of profit. The capitalists have to make the highest profit possible. Why? Because if they don't, other capitalists are going to come in and try to take them over and push them out the market. You know, it's a dog eat dog system. And on the other hand, the working class has to fight as hard as it can to increase as much as possible the share of value that they create in the course of the working day. And that basic fight over the division of the workday, who gets what out of it, is the basis of the class struggle. And the only way that you can change that is you seize the means of production, take it over, and thereby resolve that basic fundamental contradiction under capitalism. Now, I hear that there are progress being made. Until that, you got to negotiate at the bargaining table until that time. And they made progress, according to the president of the UAW. Let's see here. They say, particularly at Ford, they say that they won the right to strike around plant closures. They won important concessions around the cost of cola, cost of living, and there was a third one. I don't recall. Wage tiers. They eliminated wage tiers as one of the key parts of their negotiation with Ford. That two-tier wage system, but Stellantis and GM, General Motors, they're not willing to talk seriously, and so therefore they have issued stand-up strike. They're calling it the stand-up movement at 38 GM locations, and the UAW workers, they're fighting. Producer, let's listen to that video you pulled up, just to get a sense of where these workers, men, women, brothers and sisters, siblings are coming from. Because
looking out this sea of red shirts today, I see power. Power of united class. Around 13,000 of our members are on strike. And depending on what happens as we continue bargaining, more may be joining them really soon. In their economy, workers live paycheck to paycheck while the billionaires buy another yacht. In their economy, we make all the sacrifice and they take all the profit. In their economy, one of our workers would have to work 400 years to make what a CEO makes in 1 year. So we're going to wreck their economy because it only works for the billionaire class. You know who's scared? The corporate media's scared. The billionaire class is scared. And the big three is scared. They to make you think you don't deserve your fair share. They want you to be afraid because they're afraid. They're afraid because they see their system, where the billionaires keep everything, crumbling. We have nothing to fear. I look around here, I see power, I see faith, and I see a working class that is fed up and fired up. I see working class people from all walks of life standing together. You all know what we need to do, and now the whole world knows what we need to do. When they tell us to sit down, we stand up.
Rosanna, you know what I like about them? It's none of that middle class stuff. We're workers. This is the working class, standing up, and that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I like
yeah, I
that big.
like that too. Me
And
too.
they're
Yeah,
unapologetically partisan. They're not they're
right.
not saying, talking about everybody coming together. They're not talking about, let's sit down and compromise. They're saying we are fighting for what we deserve. And, if the companies are unwilling to do that, then we're going to wreck them because we hold the power. That's what class struggle looks like.
That's why we call this edition the Class War on the Picket Line edition. It's not a war we chose, but it's a war that's taking place that the company is imposing. That's what's going on. They're imposing it. And the workers are fighting back. What can we do to support, Anita? We a lot of stuff taking place on the picket line. We've had a couple conversations about it. You want to share with our viewers what can the Friends of Labor do to support the
Sure.
strike?
Well, we can join workers on the picket line. If a picket line is happening in an area close to you, go out there and march with the workers for a time and talk to them and tell them we support their struggle and the community is behind them. We can pass resolutions in our municipalities, in our local groups, our faith communities. We can pass a resolution supporting the United Auto Workers in their strike. We can contact our politicians. I know we are here in a so-called red state. Republicans are in charge statewide, and we do have a plant on strike in Toledo. And we can tell our elected officials that we support the UAW and in its strike against the big three, and we hope that our elected officials are also going to go along with that and give them our support. Yeah, there's the resolution, a recommended resolution that's on the PW website, and that's very handy. You can adapt it to whatever needs you have, and then get it out on social media. Make a splash about it, put it on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, or at least your regular social media. So I think those are some ways we can support, show our support for the strike.
Now, Anita, one of the big issues in the negotiations is the question of electric vehicles and climate change, and the auto workers want some guarantees and the Republicans are making a big. Trump's supposed to go to the picket line, and I wonder if he's going to do it. And these issues came up big time last Sunday at the Fossil Fuels March, and we had a nice contingent of about 60 people coming out of New York City and DC, and Ohio had a great group there. And, we joined 75,000 people who were marching. Uh, uh, and the organizers were overjoyed and surprised, overjoyed and surprised at the size of the turnout. And Scott, um, one of the things we talked about last week was that the focus was on putting pressure on the president, Mr. Biden, to go further, do more. But don't you think that was a little bit one-sided? I mean, Biden has done some things. And what about the Republican Party, the GOP? Shouldn't,
I think
shouldn't,
that's an
shouldn't.
excellent point. Yeah, like there is this tendency to let the right off the hook, right? To say, oh, well, of course they're never gonna, support any of this stuff, and the Democrats claim to be for sustainability, for a green transition, whatever, but they're not doing enough. So yeah, put pressure on Biden, but also recognize that the major roadblock to this is not the Biden administration. It's the huge, right wing power block that enables the kind of liberal bourgeoisie, centrist, moderate, whatever, to always move to the right, right? So it shouldn't be just focus on Biden, and in the focus as well, we have to say, this is uh, workers will not pay the price. Workers are already paying the price of climate change. Um, the companies, the billionaires who profited from it, they're the ones that need to be paying to clean this up. There's this tendency, right, to say that well, um, if we work for environmental justice, we're going to have to um, you know eliminate all kinds of working class jobs in the auto industry, in the fossil fuel industries, whatever. No, the working class can't pay the price. And there's no contradiction between a pro labor program and a program of environmental justice. They go hand in hand.
And there have to be concrete ways to think that through, Um, One of our comrades in the steel industry said they're a little nervous about this fossil fuel issue because a lot of the steel jobs are tied to, work that is tied to the fossil fuel industry. And if you eliminate it, what's going to happen to our jobs? So there has to be a just transition, and that just transition has to have very specific plans and measures and programs to retrain and provide jobs to those workers and their families. Rosanna, we marched as part of the anti-militarism contingent at the march, organized by Code Pink, and there were probably we had about 1,000 people. We were a small part of it with our 60, um, and Joel made the point that this was a good tie-in between tying the issue of the military budget, because they say that the Pentagon is the biggest polluter on the planet. Think about that for a moment. So it was a good tie-in between the fight for peace and the fight for the environment. And Joel said we can march from the streets of New York back down to 23rd Street to our peace conference coming up November 11th and 12th. That was a good point she made, don't you think?
Most definitely. I think a lot of people aren't aware of the pollution that is caused by all these wars. And so I think helping people understand these things and how war really isn't, it's not protecting any of us. It's creating more profit once again for the big corporations, especially the military industrial complex. And knowing full well that those are our tax dollars that are going to polluting the air, uh, providing uh, armament to killing innocent people, things like that. I think so. I think we need to really bring that forward as to how they're all connected to climate change, to the war economy, to the suffering that we experience here in the U.S. as well as throughout the world.
Anita, the Code Pink organizers, our friends there, said that they had a big elephant, big gray elephant. They said that the elephant in the room is that the fact again that the Pentagon is the biggest polluter on the planet. And so we were marching just in front of that contingent. And how did Ohio like to march, Anita? What kinds of impressions did it make on you? And what plans do you have going back to Ohio and continuing to work on these kinds of issues?
Well, we had a wonderful experience in New York. I think my comrades, especially, they were very young. Most of them were young people, and they were really inspired by the numbers of people that were out there. The creativity in the march was really striking too. I guess some kind of paper mache elephant, which could also have been a symbol for the GOP. That is the a barrier to our progress on climate change. But I think they were just inspired by those folks on the march. We got to see people, especially I haven't seen all of the speeches yet because I wasn't able to see them on the march, but they're all on YouTube. And we're going to make connections with the people well, we have made already connections with some groups in Columbus and other parts of Ohio that are fighting for the same issues. And now we're coming back with just a stronger commitment to fight for those changes, because people saw how when the people rise up, they really make a difference. It's such a contrast between the 75,000 people demanding that we end fossil fuels, and then you have these Republican candidates like Ron DeSantis saying that he wants to increase oil and gas production and shut down alternative energy. Vivek Ramaswamy saying that it's am I frozen? That it's the climate. That it's the Biden climate project that's hurting the working class, when that's just not true.
When we rise up and fight back, Rosanna, we win.
Definitely.
And it takes a fight to win. That's always the case. It's always going to be the case. There's nothing you can do about it.
And ultimately, we have the ultimate power. We really do. We have the numbers. There's the numbers. We just have to all be standing up and fighting back.
And there was a big win this week around the immigration front for migrants from Venezuela. There has been a lot of pressure on the Biden administration in New York and other parts of the country to do something to address the crisis situation facing migrants. Because, in Florida and Texas, they're busing migrants like cattle. They're just such vicious. Every time I think about it, I want to scream. Busing people all over the country, men, women, children, without any notice, using them as political ploys. And so with respect to the migrants in Venezuela, Rosanna, they granted work permits so that they can work in the and begin to provide for themselves and their families. A positive development, no?
It's a tricky question, I think, or it's a tricky situation because it's only a temporary fix. It's not a permanent fix. Uh, and who's going to make sure that all of these migrants really have a livable wage and have a decent place to live? We already see many migrants living in a two-bedroom house, but two or three families live together. This is happening here in Los Angeles. Um, and once again, it's just a temporary thing to try to calm the situation. But in reality, we need to stop um, exploiting the resources of these countries. We need to end the sanctions, all of the things that bring on this poverty where people feel the need to migrate to another place so that they can have a decent life, provide for their families, and be able to even just eat, simply eat. Um, so I think that it's a temporary fix. But I also feel that all migrants should get the temporary uh, um, citizenship or status, because it's not just the Venezuelans; it's many other people, migrants from all over the world that come here, and they deserve that same treatment as well.
Yeah, it's an important point. A lot of Mexicans, a lot of Guatemalans, Salvadorians, so on and so forth, Hondurans, Haitians, you know,
Haitians.
and you shouldn't use this as a political ploy because I mean, it's the on the one side there's the human factor of families and children and men and women suffering, so you can't blame them
Mhm.
uh, for fleeing because of violence or environmental issues, or for applying for asylum. But on the other hand, you know that the Biden administration has a very hostile attitude towards the Venezuelan government, and they're standing up their independent stands with respect to their own future. And Scott, this has created tensions. I was researching the story this morning and found out that the mayor of New York, who is a piece of work himself, and the president, they're not even talking. There's a big dispute between them. And they had Mayor Adams, they had put him on a Biden surrogate list. And back in February, so he started complaining that the administration wasn't doing it. No, they took that guy off the list. He's no longer a favorite son or a favored son. And so there are tensions in the Democratic Party because of this issue. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's an interesting development.
But but you're right, and then that's exactly the ploy of these right wing governors who are busing people. They're trying to create these kind of divisions. They're trying to, um, you know, drop these vulnerable migrants, these refugees, uh, into places that don't have the resources to care for them yet, uh, and turn U.S. workers against migrant workers, turn Democratic, um, you know, mayors against the Biden administration, and governors. Kathy Hochul in New York has been also critical, or insistent that the Biden administration provide this increased aid to cope with the crisis. And that's what the Republicans want, right? They want disarray and division. But it's important to remind people that granting work permits to migrants helps the U.S. working class as well. Helps U.S. workers, because these hardline anti-immigrant right wingers, they know that there's no actual chance of stopping people from coming into this country, and they don't want that. They want people who are as vulnerable, as terrorized, as incapable of standing up and demanding their own rights as possible. Because the more vulnerable that section of the working class is, the more it drags down the wages and conditions for the rest of the working class. And that's another part of the ploy. So, yes, I agree with Rosanna 100%. Work permits for all migrants, not just as a question of their rights and their dignity, which is extremely important, but also as a question of the survival and the unity of the working class.
Exactly. And one of the reasons that they're doing that is they're trying to lower the wage of all workers and to pit immigrant workers against, non-immigrant workers. And that's part of that class struggle too. And it interpenetrates with the fight for democracy and the right of these migrant families to live in this country and be able to enjoy whatever benefits that all of us have won in the course of our struggles for a better life in these United States. Let's have our mailbag question. We need comprehensive immigration reform. That's what we need. And in order to do that, you got to win a new Congress. You do. I mean, you got to defeat these MAGA right wingers. And anyway, don't get me started. My progressive friends say communism has led to violence and mass killing in other countries. We've heard that one before. Anyway, the person's serious, it seems to me. A lot of propaganda out there. What can I say to them, Anita, to ensure the same thing won't happen here?
Well, first of all, this writer needs to get better progressive friends, people who are really progressive and informed about what's going on in the world. I look at Cuba. It's a country I know something about. Violence and mass killings. I mean, in like 30 or 40 years, they've had one police shooting of a civilian in Cuba. There's no, this just doesn't make any sense in that context at all. Whereas in this country, violence is what keeps capital in power here. It's really we have much more violence in this country than we do in many countries that are trying to move towards socialism. So I'd say this isn't a progressive point of view at all. It's just an anti-communist point of view. And if you look realistically at what governments keep their citizens safer, I think you find that socialist governments are better at that than capitalist governments.
Okay, Scott, you want to take a shot at it? I mean, there have been problems. I mean, there was a Khmer Rouge situation in Cambodia, and
Yes,
there have been wars that were imposed by imperialism. So, Scott?
So I think we need to start with Anita's point that we have to look at the violence of capitalism, which takes the form of not of police violence certainly, but also of these mass shootings that are becoming more and more common, and also in the broader picture, what Engels called, or following the English working class, called social murder. So people whose life is shortened because of hunger and poverty and lack of medical care. That is also violence. People whose lives are shortened because of lack of housing, also violence. Capitalism is extremely and constantly violent. Has socialism always, have governments of socialist countries always, carried out that determination to promote, peace and human dignity and the flourishing of everyone? On the whole, mostly, but not always. And as Joe says, there have been instances where violence was was used, and that's, as Joe also pointed out, part of imperialism cracks down, right, tightens a vice around any country that tries to resist domination, any country that tries to chart its own path. And when that vice is closing, and when the CIA is funneling resources to groups trying to overthrow a socialist government, and when the airwaves are being blanketed with U.S. propaganda, it becomes very hard to maintain, that the sort of democratic and humane and progressive socialist system, and that's exactly what the intent is. And with these sanctions and this infiltration and this meddling, it's to drive socialist governments off of a peaceful path and force crackdowns that can then be used as evidence of the failure of socialism.
Rosanna, what are we going to do to ensure violence doesn't get used here?
I don't think we can ensure anything, but I think what we can do is help people ideologically develop to show that what we're fighting for is necessary in order to alleviate the suffering of people, the poverty, the lack of health care, and all of these things. I think that it's not communism that has led to violence. It's the right wing who's been reacting and trying to stop that transition, because that means the end of their profits. But I think it's worth doing some more research. I would suggest do a little bit more research so that you're able to really point out that it's not the fact that it's communism that's leading to the violence. It's the fact that people are the right wing are resisting, the profiteers are resisting all of these things. So and that in some places, are you willing to essentially give your life depending on for the right for others to come and have a decent livable wage? Sometimes that has had to happen as well. But I would say, always take into consideration that there's this right wing ideology against communism and against socialism. And that's the starting point as to how true is all of this, and how real prevalent. And, we shouldn't fear it, because if we fear it, then they've already won. And then people who don't have a voice continue to suffer. And we're not about that.
And Rosanna has the last word. We want to thank everybody for listening in this morning. Tomorrow, we have the Marxist class on the U.S. working class. Make sure you check it out. It's going to be a week-long classes, and we're going to be studying the structure of the working class and what the forces of production means, what the contradiction between it and what Marxists call the relations of production, property relations. That's the class struggle, workers on one side and the forces, the big banks' property in the other. They're going to be talking about what they call special questions, women workers, Black workers, Latino workers, Asian, LGBTQ workers, and how all these things fit together. So please check it out, and sign up, register. If you sign up and register, you can't make it, you can watch it later. We'll send you the video. It's going to be a wonderful school. Until next week, stay strong, stay safe, stay in the fight. See you on the picket line. Let's support them UAW workers. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.
Bye.
Later,